and welcome. You're watching Newsx and I'm Megha Sharma. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has once again reiterated India's commitment to Maldives. India has signed 8 key agreements in infrastructure, economy, trade, extending a credit line of 5,000 crore rupees. And besides being a reset in relationship with India, the Maldivian President Muizzu has praised the Prime Minister for providing pivotal economic assistance. This is the same president who had in the past come to power in Maldives on an India Out campaign. The Prime Minister's visit to Maldives is a fitting example of India's patient diplomacy despite Maldives' hostile actions earlier on. On second day of his visit, the Prime Minister will be the guest of honor on Maldives Independence Day, which falls today. Let's open up this discussion. Joining me on the telecast is Ambassador KP Fabian. Ambassador Fabian, let's take a look back at India-Maldives relationship. How do you think this relationship has strengthened and in testing times further fortified, except for that one blip in the 2023-2024 elections that Muizzu was fighting on the India Out campaign? I'm talking about right from the time, 1988, 2004, 2014, we have been providing all kinds of assistance to Maldives, whether it is the tsunami that had overtaken Maldives, we're talking about COVID, we're talking about the measles vaccines, we're talking about, of course, the coup attempt that had been made back in the time on the Maldivian government.
Well, thank you, Megha. You mentioned 2023 and an earlier period. Well, let me start with 1979-1982, when I was Deputy High Commissioner in Colombo. And at that time, it was the High Commissioner in Colombo who was accredited, concurrently accredited to Maldives. Now, you also mentioned about hostile actions by Maldives. I think we have to get the story right. The president, the current president, she was elected on a platform out India. Now, that did not make any sense at all. How can you say out India? India has been the first responder, always, in regard to Maldives whenever it was in trouble. And in this context, I want to draw attention of our viewers to Operation Cactus, 1988 November, when a group of extreme Tamils from Sri Lanka and some Maldivians tried to stage a coup. And India, under Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi, intervened militarily and aborted the coup. So that was the first responder act by India, and that has been repeated, whether it was COVID, whether it was shortage of some essentials, it's always India. A foreign tourist in Maldives get seriously sick, where he or she is transported to India. So it did not make any sense for anyone in Maldives to say India out. But having said that, let me also say that India on its part also did not get the story right. When Muizzu wanted the Indian military out, we could have said, okay, we are taking them out. And then Maldives recognized immediately the need for the presence of the Indian military. And then he wanted to make his first official visit to India. And the Indian protocol could not find a date and time. So if he went to China, it is because he could not make it to India. So there was fault on India's part also. But the most important part I want to emphasize is that India is capable of self-correction. And India has done it magnificently. It is human to err, but to correct oneself at the right time, in the right manner, that is something special, and that India has done. And the Prime Minister's visit shows that India can do it in a very convincing manner, and we have sent a good message to China.
Absolutely. I'm also being joined by Patikrit Pen. Patikrit, visuals on our screens of the Independence Day celebrations that Maldives will be commemorating in just a short while from now. And as Ambassador Fabian said, you know, there are historic ties, commercial ties, religious ties, culture ties, people to people ties that bind India and Maldives together. I will talk about how the president of Maldives, Mohammad Muizzu, has turned around by way of first paying a visit to India during the inauguration ceremony of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who was elected for the third time as the Prime Minister, and then later on making a special state visit, the first for Muizzu after he became the president of Maldives. How did this course correction take place, and why did Muizzu think that he had to roll back the aggressive campaign that he had been pursuing against India?
Well, first and foremost, I respectfully disagree. I do not think India has been at fault for not meeting the Maldives president. I mean, if you have a campaign where you say quit India and you expect to be, you know, do anything, we are there was a state of intent to India by showing spike growth. I respect that.
Okay, Patikrit, I will have to interrupt you over there. There is an audio connection problem. We'll try to fix that. Meanwhile, I'm going to come to Gautam Mukherjee. Gautam, same question. What was that pivotal point that forced Muizzu to rethink his strategy towards India?
I think he got whatever he could, Megha, from the Chinese and realized that they'd given him $1 billion, but that's as far as it was going to go. He also noticed or reckoned up the fact that we had given him a soft loan for $450 million, that he was having great trouble to meet his balance of payments commitments, interest payment commitments, and was in financial difficulties. Maldives was in financial difficulties. He then hit upon the idea that he has to balance the relationship between China and India in order to derive benefit from both. He set about doing this by a number of visits, his own as well as other members of his team, and this is now culminated in Modi visiting the Maldives and extending yet another soft loan for about nearly $600 million. Not only that, India has been both firm as well as diplomatic. It has ramped up its relationship with Mauritius. It has created a military base in Lakshadweep. It has repaired its relationship with Sri Lanka, and everywhere in Sri Lanka in particular, which had also swung too much into the Chinese camp, has realized when it went bankrupt that it was India that came to its rescue rather than China, which did help a little with the balance with the interest payments and the installment payments that it was owed, but that was about it. India not only gave them a loan, it also helped to get a loan from the IMF for Sri Lanka. Now, Maldives has been watching all this, and as every commentator has said, India is just a few nautical miles away, and we've always been the first responder to the Maldives. Our tourists used to be as much as almost 15% of their tourist income, which fell drastically to around 5% after, if you like, the Maldives misbehavior. So everything has corrected towards the middle, And India is quite willing to move on because it is aware that Maldives is in a geostrategic position on the shipping routes, and they do not want to give China more than its due in terms of bases and operations in the Indian Ocean, in which the Maldives can help us play a stellar role.
Okay.
Megha.
Mitali, I'm going to come to you, and let's also break it down to the brass tacks. At the end of the day, economic relationship between India and Maldives becomes the foundation of how our diplomatic relations move forward. And one look at the bilateral trade figures over the years 2013 to 2024 up until March 2024, we see a sudden, I take a look at these figures. The total number of Indian exports to Maldives stood at $544 million, and suddenly in 2024 they have dropped down to a minuscule $84.69 million. Something similar for Maldives as well. Total imports from Maldives $5.14 million in 2023, and in 2024 it's less than $10 million. So that narrates a story in itself.
Yeah, absolutely, Meghna. But, I think what we have to always understand when we are talking about trade figures is that most of these figures are on trade in goods. But what India was actually purchasing from the Maldives was trade in services, which is the tourist services that Maldives had to offer. And in fact, when you add up the figures of trade in goods plus trade in services, the relationship actually skewed in favor of Maldives, because just think about the steady stream of tourists who were going from India to Maldives. So many Bollywood films were being shot in the Maldives. Not only Bollywood, I would say all Indian films, were being shot in the Maldives, Indian web series. It's a massive industry which was generating millions of dollars of revenue for the Maldives. So many luxury resorts were getting co-invested, with investors from India who were taking investments to create jobs in the Maldives. So, it's not only about this very narrow view that the president of the United States has sort of put down our throats almost since April, where we are always talking about trade in goods. We have to understand that economic relationships go far beyond, trade in goods, and it's all about trade in goods and services, as well as the investment that we can generate. And the most important thing is jobs. Today, when we look at the global economy, we know that there is going to be a massive, sort of crisis of jobs. People need to be skilled. Who is the best person for a global South country to train your youth in the use of technology? It is the Indian IT engineer. Because the Indian IT engineer is the most sought after, well-trained, highly skilled person who can work in global companies. Now, just imagine if the ties between India and global South countries like Maldives become stronger, then India can say, I want to invest in creating a global capability center in the Maldives. India can say, I will set up an Indian Institute of Technology in the Maldives. India has just set up an Indian Institute of Technology in the UAE. So at the end of the day, we have to stop short selling ourselves as a country. We have many sellable skills. We have a thriving startup ecosystem in India. We have thriving, youth in India who have new ideas, who are willing to work
absolutely.
with new technology.
India has been for decades together providing all kinds of assistance, building infrastructure, building roads, bridges, maritime exercises, developing their maritime infrastructure, talking about health services, talking about building hospitals, educational institutes, you name it, and India has been providing assistance by way of line of credit, by means of soft loans, by means of providing financial and material investments into into Maldivian infrastructure for further burgeoning the economy of the island nation. I'm also being joined by Commander Bhushan Devan, and Commander Devan, again, when we talk about Maldives' relationship with India and this transgression that happened under Muizzu's government at the time of he was being elected, of trying to sway towards China, have there been lessons learned, and particularly with regards to the contrasting ideologies both China and India represent? India from the very start has time and again assured and ensured that it does not have territorial aspirations, whether we talk about Sri Lanka, Bangladesh and even Maldives, vis-a-vis the practices that China has been moving forward with, the debt diplomacy, the expansionist, aggressionist kind of ideologies that it has been carrying forward, whether it is Sri Lanka, Nepal, Pakistan, even Bangladesh for that matter, and Maldives as well. So is there been a point for the Muizzu government to take a step back, to reassess the situation and then realize where its interests lie?
Totally, Meghna, I agree with this assessment of yours, but I just want to say that such remarriages which happen after a divorce, they last longer because each partner knows its respective strengths and weaknesses. India and Maldives are just 13 miles away from each other. And now one of the things, for example, just a simple example, Prime Minister Modi has given them social housing projects for their defense personnel, Maldives Defense Force, and also vehicles over there. I mean, I'm sure every Maldivian president down knows that maintaining these vehicles, upgrading these houses, can China come to them? The sheer feasibility of China being helpful to Maldives. Forget about the debt diplomacy and not debt diplomacy, debt capture, the debt expansion of China. And you rightly said it that India has been an example of live and let live and true cooperation. And that is where we are accepted highly, whether it is African countries or Gulf countries, Middle East, Maldives, Sri Lanka. And of course, there are political compulsions. Potential president has different political tune to sing. And once he comes to chair, he has a different tune to sing. So I can see the relationship going forward very strongly because of geographical proximity, besides cultural proximity. Another very important aspect, tourism, we all know about it. You might be recalling that 15-20 years back, besides what Operation Cactus, respected ambassador mentioned, regarding the preventing coup, taking over a new regime through coup being, coming into power in Maldives. You know that many years back, Maldives have held their conference underwater. Why? They know with the warming of oceans in the world, Maldives is one of the earliest countries to be on hit list. Small country. And the point I'm making is now one of the accords signed now is with the Indian Institute of Tropical Meteorology between India and Maldives. They need to get a grip. Maldives need to get a grip on all their knowledge base, whether it is IT or whether it is health services, banking services. I mean, even Russia, for example, has been initially taking help from India for the chartered accountancy, commerce, and now things like meteorology. I'm just saying there is a very close affinity and need and mutual potential for mutual help, which China cannot fulfill that. Besides being their aggressive exploitative way of controlling the whole world. And one more thing. So in going forward, all in all, on all aspects, I can see this is a watershed moment. I feel this is a watershed moment from where lessons of the previous government, which was pro-India, and this government, which was anti-India. Now relations have stabilized, have normalized. Perhaps they'll go forward aggressively and forcefully to the best interests of the both countries and best interests of the region.
Okay. So then, looking forward, what does the future of Maldives and India look like? Ambassador Fabian, can Maldives exist by way of maintaining bilateral relations with China and simultaneously with India? We have seen this happen with the other countries in our neighborhood in the subcontinent following the same policy.
Well, two things. One is that Maldives has to understand, and it has understood, that India alone can take care of Maldives' basic interests. And second point is that Maldives comes within India's security perimeter, and India will do whatever it has to do to take care of India's national security interests. That is a point which both Maldives and China have to understand. And we can take it that Maldives has understood it, and to my mind, China too has understood it. Now, the last point I want to make it is that the success of a country's foreign policy is to a significant extent determined by its ability to maintain good neighborly relations with its neighbors. So India has done very well with Maldives, and India has to take it forward in regard to other neighbors.
Okay, I'm going to come back to this China angle and Gautam, about the Belt and Road Initiative of China, which has been accepted, acknowledged, and in fact to the tune of billions of dollars in loan that have been taken by Maldivian government to build infrastructure under the Belt and Road Initiative of China, something that has been categorically rejected by India time and again. How must India deal with Maldives in a way to, I don't know, are we going to be more influential at this point in time? Are we going to coax Maldives to ensure India's interests are safeguarded?
Well, if you notice, Chinese help for Maldivian infrastructure development has come around $1 billion worth. This includes development of their airport and various other infrastructure. India has also contributed now about $1 billion as well by way of soft loans, and has in this visit itself signed about 10 protocols in various areas of business. I think there will be more exploitation of the sea resources jointly. There are a lot of Maldivian islands which are not developed as yet. Those might receive some attention. Hydrological issues. Maldives is sinking into the sea. Climate change and the kind of difficulties that Maldives will face, and the preventive measures that can be taken. In many, many ways, they may not build one large road and one large airport like the Chinese tend to do, and then start charging the interest repayments at commercial rates, which almost every country has altered on. The other thing on Belt and Road, Megha, is that China isn't as prosperous as it used to be. It is now calling in a lot of the investments it has made under Belt and Road in various countries. And since most of them were made in impoverished or low economies, they're having great trouble getting their money back, their interest payments back, or indeed any joy out of capturing collateral lands and buildings and ports, because you've got to make it run. For example, Hanbantota has no customers. It's a lovely port, and the only ships that come to it are Chinese ships. It simply hasn't worked. Similarly, a lot of other places that China has ventured into under Belt and Road are not commercially viable. They are stuck with billions of dollars spent overseas to try and increase their influence, and yes, indent their various client states, but they haven't been able to turn it around to their benefit. India's never been interested. We, of course, never went with Belt and Road ourselves, but we are doing very well, and now many countries in Asia, Africa, the island nations, and so on, have realized that it's much better to go with India's cooperative development programs, where there is no exploitation and both countries benefit.
Okay.
Megha.
Okay. Then, Commander Dewan, it's also a known fact, and this had happened especially during the time India and Maldives were facing friction. There are a number of these maritime activities that were taking place in Minicoy. Maldives had allegedly been allowing Chinese spy ships to enter into its nautical miles, which were dangerously close to the Indian territory. Again, how do we strike a balance over here? Strategic interest of India, as far as the location of Maldives is concerned, is paramount. And keeping in mind a Belt and Road initiative that China has been trying to build for the last several years also includes connecting Maldives, Bangladesh and Pakistan, which surround the entire Indian Ocean and completely envelop India.
Truly, you are right. String of pearls paradigm which China has been trying to follow. And on this issue of Chinese spy ships or so-called research ships being found all over Indian Ocean, Bay of Bengal, Arabian Sea, it is very clear going forward, if any country's navy has to dominate the Indian Ocean or any sea for that matter, they have to do detailed mapping, the underwater mapping of the seas, oceans concerned. Reason? When the submarines move in the waters, the crux of the matter is submarines communicate with each other, or submarines detect the enemies, or submarines are detected by their aggressors through sound. And you know, in seawater, because of different density of sea going from top to bottom, different temperature going from top to bottom, the sound waves tend to, and the bottom terrain, the sound waves tend to bend. And there is something technically known as shadow zone. And submarines can very well lurk in the shadow zone. So aggressor submarine would do well if the bottom is well mapped, sea is well mapped. This is what spy ships are doing. That they know where to hide in the shadow zones in the seas. So this is what America, Russia, China is trying to create a full map of these our oceans, our seas. Now, issue is, will Maldives allow it? To my mind, as a trump card, Bangladesh also we have found trying to do it, use it against India. And similarly, you can't. And now recently, Sri Lanka also doing something like that. So you can't rule this out. There's no guarantee. Going forward, they may use this as a trump card, as a negotiating chip, bargaining chip, to pressurize India or to bargain with India. But of course, you know, there is something known as Colombo Security Conclave, which is in existence since 2014.
Yes.
It has been rather dull. It's almost 11 years now. And the countries in this are India, Bangladesh, Maldives, Mauritius, also in Sri Lanka. So these truly South Asian nations plus Mauritius. And Seychelles is an observer nation. Now this has to be on India's initiative. This has to be really ramped up very nicely. If it is not, so that the defense cooperation, whether tomorrow there's a question of any disaster help, tomorrow there's a question of any military intervention, or tomorrow there's a question of any, this allowing Chinese ships to swoop around, all these things have to get written down in those agreements. To what extent those agreements are followed is the next step. But this is what ramping up CSC is a big time issue for India, for our controls of our oceans, because coming wars are all going to happen in ocean.
Right.
So this is a very important point that you've raised. But so I'll summarize to say that you can't really guarantee, will Maldives not use it as a bargaining chip against India? So at the end of the day, this is another phenomenon I want to share with you. I found, I mean, I've traveled to Maldives also, many of us would have. Another point I'm finding, the strident or radical Islam is also trying to take roots in Maldives. But this may be the handiwork of Pakistan and so on, surely, or even China also. No, we have to. So, but the point is the economic benefit which Maldives gets out of relating to us. That is a very strong bond between us. But one small thing I want to highlight also, but from a personal observation, 2019 October, I had gone for a cruise to Maldives, and there we boarded a cruise ship and we flew to Malé and came by a cruise ship from there to Bombay. I want to tell you that it is a sad thing. I was shown there's a huge bridge over a sea. Of course, almost everything is in sea, which was initially being built by India. It couldn't be done well and fast enough. And lo and behold, that bridge construction was handed over to China later on. The point I'm making is, our good nature and win-win cooperation is fine, but on the ground, delivery of our projects has to be highly professional, so that on that ground we are not unfavored in favor of China.
Yeah.
We have to put our house order in this. Yeah.
Okay. I'm also being joined by Professor Nalapat on the broadcast. Professor Nalapat, what is the symbolism involved here when Prime Minister Narendra Modi participates in the Independence Day celebrations of Maldives? The first time the Prime Minister visited Maldives was in 2014, once he was elected the Prime Minister of the country for the first time.
Look, I'd like to say that the Maldives, as any visitor will tell you, is really a wonderful place, very friendly people, and yes, absolutely, the commander is perfectly right. There is an effort to create a radical section of Maldivians, and they have succeeded. But the reality is that that's a small segment, and it is very clear from the experience that we have got in the Middle East that if you come under extremism, whether you're a Shia state like Iran, or you're talking about Gaza, Lebanon, then you suffer. Economically, you suffer. And today the youth are interested in a good life, in a good job. And frankly, I would like to say, coming back to Indian context, our urban Naxal problem, a lot of that has been solved by jobs for jobless youth. And therefore, I think that this whole grip over over these radical groups is now weakening, and that is one of the reasons why President Muizzu, who originally came to power with the support of these radical groups, has now become very friendly to India, because India is opposed to radicalism. On the other hand, China feeds radicalism. China feeds any radical movement anywhere, and in fact any anti-US, anti-Indian movement they feed anywhere, including in the Maldives and in Ukraine, of course, where they basically have been fighting on behalf of Russia, because the Americans were, until Donald Trump came, very pro-Ukraine. But the reality situation is Maldives is very important, and it is no small thing to invite a dignitary for the 60th, not 60th celebrations of Maldivian independence. It shows that there's been a complete turnaround in relations. I think thanks to the ceaseless efforts put in by Prime Minister Modi, ably assisted by External Affairs Minister Jaishankar. And I'd like to say that otherwise this invitation would not have been given. And secondly, the fact that such a warm welcome has been given by no less a personage than President Muizzu, who came to power initially against the moderate faction and accused them of being pro-India.
Yeah.
His entire election plank was, if I can put it in Hindi, Bharat Hatao. That, you just remove India from the Maldives. And now he is the the honored guest is the Prime Minister of India, Sri Narendra Modi. It is no small symbolism, I can tell you. And I fully agree with the commander about the importance of mapping the ocean floor. The Chinese are doing it, the Americans are doing it, and we are also, in our own way, doing it. And I think in this situation, where there's a clear divide between the democracies and between the authoritarian China, which wants to dominate the Indo-Pacific, the blue water is very important. I want to flag one more thing, and that is that the blue water is also important from an economic point of view. Enormous resources, enormous mineral resources, enormous vegetable resources are there in the blue waters. And I can tell you that we are talking of trillions of dollars, not billions, trillions of dollars on the seabed, and even on the coastal seabeds of the littoral countries. So we are talking of a very big situation here, and we're talking about contest between China and India on the one hand, and Indian partners on the other, such as the US on the other. And yes, it's a race, but I do believe that we will win that race finally. Ultimately, democracy is stronger than authoritarianism, and we have a very able leader in Prime Minister Modi. So I'm confident of, but please remember, it's not only security, but economics. And of course, the better economics you have, the more security you have. Thank you.
Absolutely. Before I speak about economics, I will come back to you, Gautam Mukherjee, and understand from you about the perception that surrounds the relationship between India and Maldives and India and China, because it looks more like Maldives being a protectorate or a vassal state, a country that bows down to Xi Jinping's diktats, versus what India has built, which is a relationship that has lasted 60 years, right from the start of India when it gained independence to stepping up to the plate and supporting, assisting Maldives in every step of the way, in the calamities that Maldives have faced. We spoke about the 1988 coup d'etat attempt that had taken place, an Indian military that came out to back the then president and safeguarding his government and the country of Maldives. So here is a relationship that has truly stood the test of time. And on the other hand, this is a new relationship. Maldives is testing waters, but clearly a relationship of a debtor and the benefactor. And Xi Jinping has never visited Maldives. I think Muizzu was the one who traveled to Beijing to hold that meeting. So what perception does this relationship, if you compare between India and Maldives and China?
Well, I think China basically wanted a base there and has succeeded in taking over one of the islands on lease for the next 50 years. So it has got itself a base. It has bases all over the Indian Ocean and is trying for one in Bangladesh. It has one in Sri Lanka. So that's how it's proceeding. It's not terribly interested in the welfare of the Maldives, and the Maldives have realized this, that in retrospect, we've been there always. We are just a few nautical miles away. We've come to their rescue on multiple issues, whether it's a water shortage, whether it's a coup, whether it's their economic malaise, their security interests, and so on. So Maldives is definitely trying to balance it, and besides, there isn't anything else forthcoming from China. They also have a terrible financial crisis, as I mentioned before, because the Indians have backed off quite substantially, both in trade and in tourism and in security matters. We have made other arrangements via Mauritius, via Lakshadweep, and so we diminished the geopolitical importance of the Maldives. And the Maldives realized that, look, we might become irrelevant to India if we keep this up. And so they have done a U-turn and tried very hard now to restore the balance between China and India, and particularly with India, where it wants to go ahead on a cooperative basis. And that is why we have signed so many protocols with them, so many different agreements in different areas. And we will deliver, if not as swiftly as the commander pointed out in terms of making a bridge, but steadily and elephant fashion. That is how India operates. Megha.
Okay, all right. Yogendra, also on the telecast with me, talking about economics, and in the last 12 to 15 months, we have seen a drastic reduction in the number of Indian nationals traveling to Maldives for vacations. Tourists who used to throng Maldives at all times of the year have decided to pick alternative places. And I think this has been a massive realization for the Maldivian government as well, because it thrives primarily on tourism. Do you think this rapprochement that has happened between India and Maldives now is now going to positively impact the Maldivian government's coffers? The exchequer is once again going to very rapidly see an increase in the number of Indian tourists and the tourism related industries.
Right, Megha. The present relationship between India and Maldives only tends to signify that we are living in a highly interdependent world. When it comes to the two terms, which is diplomacy and economy, there is a belief that it's the diplomacy that drives the economy. I'll put it this way, that it's also the economic considerations that drive the diplomacy. I would definitely agree that there are security concerns for India, as Maldives happens to be our maritime neighbor. And I think Modi government is very particular about maintaining good relations in its neighborhood, because they understand the importance of security. On the other hand, as you just rightly said, that Maldives also realized over a period of time that it's the economics that drives a nation, and you cannot live in this world with, a kind of egoistic mindset. So point is, you need to break the ice, and I think the decision that has been taken, it is going to benefit both the countries, and we are already seeing things working on ground. When we see that there has been an extension of the credit line facility to Maldives by India, by it's of 4,850 crores. And going forward, I think it's also a reflection of the fact that in today's world, you don't have either permanent friends or permanent enemies. You need to work as a cohesive nations in terms of development, and that's what we are seeing is taking place.
Okay. Professor Nalapad, again, a very important point that needs to be highlighted over here is that Prime Minister Modi has visited, this is his third visit to Maldives as the head of the state. I think the maximum number of visits that have been paid by the Indian head of state in the history of India-Maldives relationship. What does this say about the Prime Minister's policy, ideology and intent towards Maldives? Professor Nalapad, I would request you to unmute yourself.
Sorry. Yeah, I'd like to say that it shows that Prime Minister Modi understand geopolitics in a way that I'm sorry to say several of his predecessors did not. Jawaharlal Nehru was a great man, and by the way, he was a good scholar also. He wrote some wonderful books. But the fact of the situation is that he allowed China to completely seize control of Tibet. And Tibetan plateau is so highly strategic to India. It's of such high strategic value to India. And yet, when the Chinese PLA invaded Tibet, we did nothing. And may I point out at that point in time, the Chinese had, I'm talking about 1950, 1951, the Chinese had hardly any air force. They had only a land army, and we had got a good air force. And if we wanted, we could have got allies. Unfortunately, we allowed that opportunity to slip, and Tibet became, for time being at least, a part of China. It was also truncated. But I think, therefore, it's important to have a prime minister who understands geopolitics, as Narendra Modi does. And he knows the importance of Maldives in terms of the significance in security of the Indo-Pacific. And I think as far as the Chinese base is concerned, well, Maldives is a sovereign nation. So a sovereign nation can always, go back, on an agreement and say, I'm sorry, there are certain conditions. You can't use it against, for example, a friendly neighbor of ours, which is India. And if you don't accept that condition, you please shut this down. The Maldives, being a self-respecting and independent country, has the right to say that. Because the reality is that the Maldives and India form a very close bond, as you correctly said, for a very long time. And if you look at the Maldivian people, in fact, there is some theory that they're linked to people from Kerala, and they're very, very friendly people. And they love India, and Indians love Maldives when they go there. Of course, Lakshadweep is also very beautiful. But I'd like to say that thanks to that understanding, he has basically welcomed President Muizzu's turnaround in relations with India. Muizzu came to power on a anti-India slogan: "Get rid of India, get rid of India. We don't want India." He came to power on that slogan, and now the same person is inviting the Prime Minister of India, no less, for the 60th anniversary celebration. It's a very, very important celebration for any country in the Maldives. So I think it shows the remarkable progress that has been made as a result of our diplomacy and as a result of the common sense of the Maldivian leadership. And I welcome this move on the part of President Muizzu. It will be to the benefit of his people, and I welcome his commitment to the benefit of his people. And I really am happy about the very warm welcome that Prime Minister Modi has received in the Maldives. A very warm welcome indeed. Thank you.
Absolutely. Commander Bhushan Dewan, we're getting those visuals on our screens of the Independence Day celebrations, the ceremony that is ongoing right now in Malé. We saw Prime Minister Narendra Modi as the chief guest. There was a National Security Advisor Ajit Doval who was also present. Right now, the national anthem of Maldives being played on the grounds where the celebrations are taking place. There were tanks that are there are a number of military forces that are present over there. Of course, there is this entire military parade that had taken place before the national anthem of Maldives being played out. Okay, Commander Bhushan, then interesting enough, we have so many points of commonality between Maldives and India, and I cannot but further emphasize that another neighboring country and island nation which had invited Prime Minister Modi just a few months ago for its Independence Day celebrations, and that was Sri Lanka as well. That was Sri Lanka, and the highest civilian honor that was presented to Prime Minister Narendra Modi by the Sri Lankan President. Again, points of commonality over there about the temporary rift that had been witnessed between India and Sri Lanka, and again we saw that China was trying to build its presence by way of naval bases, taking over economic zones, has not really played out to the way China and Sri Lanka would have wanted to. Again, Sri Lanka then trying to rebuild its prosperous ties with India, and to a large extent those have been healed, those have been repaired. Unfortunately, in Bangladesh, we see quite the turmoil, which is not to India's benefit. What do you have to say about India and its relationship with the subcontinent, and Chinese intervention that has left a sour taste between India and its immediate neighbors?
Megha, China is bound to do these things, but in the overall perspective, as a macro trend, if you see, any country, and especially a large country like India, has always a greater difficulty maintaining good relations with neighbors. Perforce, neighbors are smaller, so they feel that there is a sense of insecurity in any case. You try to help them out too much, they feel you are patronizing us. Remain away from them, aloof from them, whether Nepal or whatever, you say, no, you're a big brotherly, you're aloof, you think you're a big guy. Even though they may be dependent. You know, the diplomacy, to my mind, with other countries which are far away from any country like India versus diplomacy with nearby neighbors, is a different ball game altogether. Though respected ambassador will put a different perspective to this. But I also want to tell you, it is much more challenging really. But having said this, I mean, I was saying in the earlier bite with you that, you know, we have a lot of things to offer to Maldives. But let me tell you, you know, Maldives, $8 billion GDP, about 1/3 or 1/4 comes from tourism. More than 1/4, less than 1/3. Now, out of that, about $2.5 billion or $2,500 million, you know that Indian tourists are contributing just $141 million per year, which is just 6%, 7%. So it's not a huge thing. I must tell you that the leverage that we have, we have to be cautious how much leverage do we have. It's all right to see in absolute numbers, India, 1 lakh tourists, now it becomes 50,000 tourists. I'm giving an example. So that is okay. But in the overall perspective of Maldives economy, it is not a huge difference to my mind. Secondly, surprisingly, per capita GDP of India is roughly $3,000. This is a USD. And their GDP per capita is around 12,000 USD. And no wonder, I mean, if you go to Maldives, I mean, I found when I went there, we tend to think, oh, I'm from India, you know, who are these guys, chota-mota guys? It's not that. There are a lot of pride in themselves. I could see it. So the point I'm making is, I'm sure diplomats will be much more conscious of this compared to what I'm saying. That, you know, we just cannot think that, you know, oh, small country, anything, where will they go? Perhaps they have to come to us. So we have to really mollycoddle them, to my mind, because sensitivity is very high.
Okay.
And same is to Nepal, Bangladesh, everywhere.
Okay, Gautam Mukherjee, this point particularly, you know, quite a complaint that these countries surrounding India in the subcontinent, the smaller countries, have, that India seems to be playing the quote-unquote big brotherly role. But somehow these countries have very quietly accepted China's, you know, benefactor role without question. How do we see geopolitics playing out in the subcontinent?
Well, I think earlier the idea was that China was so 5 times bigger than India in terms of its economy, and therefore it was only second to the United States. There was a possibility this was often part of the propaganda, that they would overtake America and become the #1 economy and dominate the world, not only just Asia, but the whole world. This was the thinking. Now, China is growing at around 4% at best. It is not enough. It needs 8% growth to prevent unrest in its own country. India, on the other hand, has the highest rate of growth in the world. It's growing at upwards of 6.5%. and is rapidly going on to become the third largest economy. Now, in terms of purchase power parity, which cannot be ignored, 50,000 rupees in India buys as much as $3,500 in the United States. So our purchase power parity position is already number 3, and in purchase power parity terms, we're at 13 trillion and not at 4 trillion in absolute GDP terms. So India is unstoppable, and a lot of these small countries around us who've gotten away with this sort of chip on your shoulder type of behavior, that you are dominating us, you are big, you think you're too big, etc., etc., can think what they like. We are going to chug along and go ahead, and the world is acknowledging that fact, and these people can ignore us or be hostile to us at their own peril. The only worry we really have is China, because China has a substantial capacity to do us damage and is constantly working on doing India as much damage as it can in diplomacy, in economics. At the same time, it is saying to us, it's wonderful that way. It keeps a knife out all the time to stab us. At the same time says, why don't we normalize relationships? And we are now also learning the game, and we are also normalizing to some extent and being wary in equal measure.